Whilst playing chess, a wonderful European emigre, chess player in the scene, gave me a very battered book, paperback book, and said, "You have to read this." And it was a copy of Schindler's Ark. A week later, Stephen Zalian says, "We want you to read this." And it was a script of Schindler's List. And I said, "Stephen, I've just been," who will believe me? Who will believe me? But that's the kind of ghosts that sometimes I think are just pushing me around a bit. So I read Schindler's List, which was shattering, and by Stephen, and I met Spielberg, and at first I was very nervous about accepting the role, and Stephen asked me into his office, and I'm always very keen to understand my narrative function in a film. With Simon, of course, it was clear. The bringer of truth, Simon. And with Itzhak Stern, I had a word in my pocket. And I said to Steven Spielberg, "What do you think the narrative function of my role is?" Now, some Hollywood directors would go blank and look at my lips to see what language I'm speaking. But Stephen said, "He's the witness of the film." And I said, "I have a word here in my pocket that says conscience." And we shook hands, the witness and the conscience of the film. And I love being with Stephen next to the monitor, because there was a particular exodus of the Jews from Krakow, which was filmed by Stephen, all of it beautifully shot in black and white, as you know. And I would watch real live actors, a lot of Israeli actors we had in the film. Wonderful, wonderful, extraordinary performances. And I saw the actors and our own extras leaving the ghetto, and I looked at the monitor, and there it is in black and white. And I'm watching a piece of a maestro recreate documentary footage, flawless. Even the camera was in the right, sort of slightly wrong, if you see what I mean, place. They looked like snatched moments. And in his genius, he often pulled the camera away from a moment of atrocity, so that the audiences are almost wriggling in their seats trying to see what they've just missed, but he takes the camera away. Absolute maestro. And I remember some takes that he would film, and he would turn to me if I was by him, by the monitor, and with joy in his face, rather like Simon Wiesenthal, he said, "That's in the movie. That has to be digested by an audience. That has to be witnessed. That has to be seen." And it's very brave and pure of him not to sentimentalize one frame of that film. I had a picture of Anne Frank in my coat pocket, and I would say to this picture, this beautiful girl, before takes, "I'm doing this for you." A simple direct line from me to her. And I was thrilled beyond measure when Robert Dornhelm asked me to play Otto in the film, because I'd already loved her. Unequivocally. Before I started filming, I was asked to visit Mépris, who was the secretary who kept them alive. And I was in her 90s, and I remember I am actually quite allergic to coffee. It's not very good for me. And Meet, bless her, came into her living room in the apartment in Amsterdam with this tray of coffee and said, would you like some coffee? I said, I'd love some. And of course was hyperactive and shaky for the rest of the afternoon. She was a wonderful woman. I've had the opportunity of having dear Itzhak Stern's widow, Sophie, on my arm in the last scene of the film. That was Sophie Stern on my arm. I had the privilege of meeting Simon and loving him, and also Miep. There's a lovely photograph in our house on the mantelpiece of myself and Miep with this painting of Anne Frank between us. She's there. It's just an accident of the photograph that there she is, smiling, beautiful photograph of Anne. And there was a lovely man. I think he was George. I think he was called George. And there's a knock on my trailer door, and my assistant at the time, who was looking after that movie, said, there's an old friend of Otto Frank's would like to say hello. And I was completely in my Otto disguise, my costume, my pencil, moustache, makeup, and that lovely thinning hair that Otto had, Otto Frank. So I thought, yeah, okay, I'll say hello. Yeah. I opened my trailer door, and George went, there's my friend, and hugged me and hugged me and hugged me. And that direct line, the generosity of people who've lost so much, who actually say, go on, yes, tell the story. Like Simon watching me, all these extraordinary gestures that help us make something out of nothing. And all the research, and I have great respect for actors who research and research and research. I do very little. I rely on the floating molecule to breathe in, or whatever you want to call it, and extraordinary gestures like that. Why did I have that picture in my pocket? Why was that picture put on my dressing room table? Why does this man come across Amsterdam to walk onto a film set and knock on a trailer door, and then of all the beautiful gifts, he just says, there's my friend. There he is. I was filming a frightfully bad film in Vienna, and I went back to my trailer, and on the table was a black and white photograph of a really distinguished looking guy. And I said to my assistant at the time, he was called Brookie, I said, Brookie, this photograph has been placed on my trailer, and on the back of it, it says, you must meet this man. I was filming in Vienna. And Brooke said, that's Simon Wiesenthal. And that was a year before I met him. I still, to this day, do not know how that photograph arrived in my trailer. But there it was. Well, I had occasion to meet Simon, and that was extraordinary, because I met him in Vienna, and I went to his office in Vienna, where he waved at the documents on the walls of his archives and said, this is blood turned to ink. I'll never forget that, how succinctly and poetically and shockingly he said, we have ink now, statistics, and this is blood turned to ink. And we probably waved his hand across 1 million lives in one gesture, looking at one shelf, There are gestures that come directly from Simon, and I incorporated them into my performance. When I met Simon, and I loved him, when I met Simon in Vienna, as Arnold so eloquently said, he would be racked with, I would almost call it survivor's guilt, but he was such a brilliant man. I think he transcended that. But whenever he used the phrase, I survived, very often he would have to pause And he did weep, and he had a particular gesture of drawing his hand across his face as he wept, which was something that I found so beautiful and so articulate that I dared to incorporate it into my own performance. And there were other gestures of his too, and wonderful hand gestures and arm gestures to try and, with his body language, and he was a magnificent man, with his body language, try and make the incomprehensible comprehensible. And he was a conduit, he was a shaman, he was a storyteller, and he lived to tell the story.